Before we begin, I just want to say thank you for being here. Whether you found this story on YouTube, Audible, or somewhere in between, I hope it pulls you into a time and place that feels familiar. A small town, a long summer, and a group of kids chasing something bigger than they understood at the time. As you listen, I'd love for you to be part of the story too. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what you thought about the story once you've finished. Your thoughts, memories, and connections mean everything, and they help keep stories like this alive. All right, let's begin. Chasing Maris by My Florida Short Stories. Chapter 1. The Fight at the Field. Summer of 1974 had only just begun, and the heat over Melrose was already heavy enough to slow a man's thoughts. The kind of heat that sticks to your neck and makes the air feel thick and living. Behind Melrose Elementary, the dirt baseball field glowed orange under the late afternoon sun. That was where the boys were. It was always where the boys were. Baseball wasn't something they played after school. It was something they carried with them. They argued balls and strikes walking home, practiced swings with broom handles, and measured summers by how many games fit between sunburns. In Melrose, baseball didn't end when the sun went down. It just paused. Dylan stood at shortstop, calm and steady. Austin bounced near second, pretending every grounder was the last out. Malik leaned on the fence, already planning his next at-bat. Trent paced the outfield, calling his shot, and Toby came pedaling in late, shoebox tied to his bike with twine, skidding to a stop like he was stealing home. Toby jumped off. Time out. Dylan squinted. This better be good. Y'all, I brought it. The others gathered around him. Toby unwrapped an old red bandana from around the ball and held it up in both hands. The sun caught the faded ink across the leather. The signature. Roger Maris, Curtis's ball, Toby's grandpa. Dylan let out a low whistle. That's the real thing? Toby nodded. Grandpa said I'm old enough to appreciate it now. Wanted y'all to see it, too. The boys passed it between them with the respect kids rarely show for anything. Nobody said much. They didn't have to. The ball said everything. Then trouble rolled in. Two older teens, Ricky Hogg and Clay Hogg, came pedaling up fast, kicking dust behind them. Boys the town whispered about. 16, mean-eyed, always looking for something to break. Ricky's bike skidded to a stop. Well, look at the Melrose losers. Clay pointed at the ball in Dylan's hand. What you got there? Something y'all stole? It's mine, Toby said. His voice fought to stay steady. Give it back. Ricky walked closer, slow as a snake. Let me see it first. Before Toby could pull away, Ricky snatched the ball clean out of Dylan's hand. He held it up, pretending to read the signature. What's this say? Roger Maris. Maris, Malik corrected, stepping forward. Home run king. Clay let out a low whistle. So it's worth something, huh? Give it back, Toby said. Now. Ricky grinned. Come take it. Toby lunged. Ricky dodged. Clay stepped in, shoving Toby back with his chest, and just like that, the field exploded into a tangle of fists and dirt. Austin shoved Clay from behind. Trent jumped on Ricky's back, arms flailing. Malik swung at Ricky's arm, trying to free the ball. Dylan did his best to pull everyone apart, shouting for them to stop, but the fight only got messier. Ricky stumbled. Clay tripped over Trent's leg. The ball flew out of Ricky's grip, bounced once off the dugout bench, rolled down the sandy hill, and headed straight toward the storm drain that fed into the lake. Toby saw it and screamed, "No, no!" All 5 boys took off running. The ball wobbled, hit a pebble, and rolled right across the grate. For a split second, it balanced there, then dropped through. The hollow clink of leather hitting metal echoed in the drain pipe. Toby fell to his knees. "No, no, no, no!" Behind them, Ricky and Clay rode off laughing. "Thanks for the show, losers." But the boys didn't listen to them. They were looking down at the dark grate where the ball had disappeared forever. Dylan crouched beside Toby. "We'll get it back." Malik peered through the bars. "It's gone, man. Straight to the lake." Austin put a hand on Toby's shoulder. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Toby covered his face with both hands. "That was Grandpa's. He kept it his whole life. I ruined everything." Dylan stood up slow, jaw tight. He looked at the drain grate, then at the woods beyond it. "No," he said. "We're not ending it like this." The others watched him. "You all know the stories." Dylan continued. "Roger Maris moved to Gainesville after he retired. Mrs. Amy from Mossman Hall said he had a cabin out here, somewhere on Rosa." Austin's eyes widened. "You think we can find him?" "Ask him for another signature," Malik said. "Fix what those idiots broke," Trent added, cracking his knuckles. Toby blinked through the tears. "Y'all would do that for me?" Dylan held out his hand. "We're a team, all 5 of us." Austin put his hand on top. "For Toby?" Malik added his. "For Curtis?" Trent smacked his hand on the pile. "And maybe for revenge." Dylan gave him a look. Toby placed his hand on top last. Together they said, "We're going to find Roger Maris." There was no plan yet, but it was a promise. And in Melrose, promises were sacred. Chasing Maris. By my Florida Short Stories. Chapter 2. The Gulf Station Clue. The boys didn't waste much time after the fight. When kids in Melrose put their minds to something, the world has a way of stepping aside. And that evening, with the sun sliding low behind the pine trees, 5 bikes rattled down Highway 26 toward Chiappini's Gulf Station. Dylan led the ride, steady as ever, pedaling with purpose. Austin followed close, legs pumping hard, still wired from the fight. Malik stayed calm, in the middle, quiet and watchful. Trent zigzagged like he was in a race no one else signed up for. And Toby. Toby kept his head down, staring at the road like he was hoping the answers were painted on the asphalt. The Gulf Station came into view. white block building with faded blue trim, one of those places that had been standing long before any of the boys were born. The Bait live wells hummed out front, and the smell of gasoline hung in the warm air like an old memory. Mark was wiping oil from his hands when he spotted them. "Well, now," he called, "if it ain't the Melrose 5, what'd y'all break this time?" Austin skidded to a dusty stop. "Nothing. We need help." Mark raised an eyebrow. Important help or regular kid nonsense? "Both," Trent said, dead serious for once. Before Mark could ask more, Robin came out of the office carrying a carton of orange sodas. He took one look on their faces and set the drinks down. "What happened?" Toby stepped forward, voice thin. "We lost my grandpa's baseball." Mark frowned. "Well, that ain't the end of the world. We got plenty inside." "It was signed," Dillon cut in, "by Roger Maris." That froze both Chiappinis in place. Robin let out a long whistle. Signed by Maris? Lord Curtis guarded that thing like gold. Toby's voice cracked. "It fell into the storm drain, straight to the lake." The men didn't laugh, didn't joke. They knew Curtis. They respected him. Dillon stepped in. "We're gonna fix it. We're gonna find Roger Maris. We need to know where he is." Mark leaned back against the pump. Roger Maris. He moved to Gainesville after retiring. 68, I think. Robin nodded. Ran a Budweiser distribution place with his brother. Quiet man. Didn't want attention. Malik stepped up, eyes steady. Did he really have a cabin out here, on Rosa Lake? Mark turned to him slow. "Who told you that?" "Miss Amy," Malik said. "She hinted." Mark sighed through his teeth. "Old rumor. Folks say Maris came out this way when he needed quiet. Rosa's good for that." Austin asked, "Did y'all ever see him?" Robin shook his head. "Not us, but someone did." "Who?" the boys said together. Mark pointed past the station toward the wash area. An older man with gray hair and sun-browned skin was rinsing the back of a pickup, cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth. "Henry," Mark said, "ask him." The boys walked over like they were heading toward something holy and dangerous. Henry didn't stop scrubbing. "What did you boys do now?" Dillon swallowed. "Sir, we're looking for Roger Maris." Henry stopped, looked up, studied each boy one by one. "What for?" Toby stepped forward. "My grandpa Curtis met him once. He had a signed ball. I lost it. We're trying to make it right." Henry spat in the dirt and nodded once. "Curtis is a good man, a real good man." "We want to fix it," Malik said. "We're not bothering him for fun." Henry mulled that over. Finally, he leaned on the tailgate. "Maris was a quiet fella. Didn't like crowds. Didn't like fuss." He pointed down the road with his cigarette. But if you boys are serious, go down Riddling Grove Road." Austin frowned. "Where's that lead?" Henry's eyes narrowed. "To a man named Nate. Knows the woods better than anyone alive." Toby asked, "Does he know where the Maris cabin is?" Henry didn't smile, didn't answer directly, just said, "If that cabin's real, Nate'll know, and if Maris is still around these parts." He tapped ash onto the dirt. "He'd know that, too." Trent whispered, "We're really doing this?" Dillon nodded. "Let's go." Henry called after them as they mounted their bikes. "Hey, boys." They looked back. "Good luck," Henry said. "You're chasing a legend." The boys rode off into the falling sunlight, headed toward the dusty back roads of Riddling Grove. Their first step deeper into something bigger than they'd ever imagined. Chasing Maris by My Florida Short Stories. Chapter 3. Riddling Grove Road. They left Chiappini's Gulf Station with more than a clue. They left with purpose. The sun was sinking low, turning the Melrose sky the color of orange peel and copper. The heat hung heavy, but the boys pedaled hard. Dillon in front, Austin right behind him, Malik steady as stone, Trent weaving like a wild man, and Toby hanging back under the weight of guilt he couldn't shake. The paved highway narrowed, the pine trees closing in on both sides until the familiar storefronts disappeared behind them. When the wooden sign for Riddling Grove Road came into view, it looked like it had been nailed there some time before any of them were born. The letters were so faded you could barely tell what they once said. "Here we go," Dillon called out. Austin rolled up beside him. "Man, this is gonna get weird. I can feel it." Malik gave a half smile. "It's Florida. Everything gets weird." Trent pointed ahead. "Look at that road, boys. Looks like a snake track." He wasn't wrong. Riddling Grove Road wasn't much of a road at all. Just a sandy, rutted path winding through old citrus groves. The trees leaned over the road like they were tired of holding themselves up. Some were dead from years without care, others still held fruit that looked half wild. The boys rode single file, the sand dragging at their tires, the branches scraping their arms. Toby finally spoke, quiet but steady. "What if this is all just stories? You know, about Maris coming out here?" Dillon kept his eyes ahead. "Then we'll find out." Austin chimed in, louder than he needed to be. "And if we don't? Well, at least we tried." Malik added, "Toby, you're not alone in this. That's the point." Toby didn't say anything more, but he pedaled harder. They rode deeper into the citrus rows until the trees seemed to part around a clearing. In the middle of it sat a shack, if you could even call it that. The roof sagged so low it looked like a man could walk by and knock it over with a sneeze. Rust stained the edges of the tin. A hand-painted sign hung sideways from a single nail. "Riddling Grove. Keep out unless invited." Trent gulped audibly. "Well, we ain't invited." Austin kicked his bike stand down. "We are now." Before they could knock, the screen door creaked open. A tall man stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. He had the kind of sunburn that comes from decades outdoors, hair pulled back behind his ears. boots worn smooth. His eyes were sharp, sharp enough to know trouble before it spoke. "You boys lost?" he asked. Dylan swallowed hard. "No, sir. We're looking for Nate." "You found him?" His voice was low, flat, and carried the weight of someone who didn't waste time on nonsense. Toby stepped forward, though he looked like he wanted to step backward instead. "Sir, we're trying to find Roger Maris." Nate's expression didn't change right away. He looked them over, each boy one by one. He watched their faces the way a hunter studies the wind. "Roger Maris," he said. "The ball player?" "Yes, sir," Dylan said. "We're trying to find him. Toby lost his grandpa's signed ball. We're trying to make it right." A long moment passed. "You kids got guts," Nate said. "Not much sense, but guts." Trent whispered, "We'll take that. We'll take any of that." Nate motioned them closer with a flick of his hand. "You boys heard the old stories, didn't you, about Maris having a place out on Rosa?" Austin nodded. "Is it true?" Nate took a breath. "It's real, but it ain't easy to find. Folks who grew up out here get turned around in those woods." Trent's eyes widened. "How do we find it?" Nate pointed to a narrow trail just beyond the shack, nearly swallowed up by palmettos. "You take that trail," he said. "Go straight till you hit the logging bridge. Don't dawdle on it. That wood's older than your granddaddy's." The boys exchanged looks. "After the bridge," Nate continued, "you'll see an old busted fence. Go left. You'll pass a truck half buried in sand. Keep going till you smell the lake. You'll know it." Mullick asked, "And then?" Nate lowered his voice, almost like the woods were listening. "Then you'll see the cabin. What you'll find when you get there, that's between you and whatever's watching over you." Toby asked softly, "Did Mr. Maris really stay there?" For the first time, Nate's hardened expression softened. He looked past the grove, past the trees, past the years. "Yeah," he said, "Roger came here when he needed quiet. Didn't want talking, didn't want reporters, just wanted the lake. Good man, kind man." Toby's voice was barely a whisper. "Do you think we might really find him?" Nate stepped forward, placing a hand on Toby's shoulder. "Kid, if you find that cabin, you'll be closer to Roger Maris than most folks ever got." He stepped back and pointed again toward the trail. "Daylight's burning, and trust me, you don't want to cross that bridge after dark." The boys didn't need to be told twice. They headed toward the shadowed trail, their bikes kicking up thin dust behind them. Toby looked back once. Nate nodded once. And then the Melrose Five disappeared into the thick Florida woods, not knowing that the adventure had only just begun. Chasing Maris by my Florida Short Stories. Chapter 4. The Bridge of Bones. The trail Nate sent them down didn't look like much at first, just a narrow cut through the palmettos worn by time and wildlife. But the farther the boys went, the thicker the woods grew around them. Old oak branches hung low and tangled, draped with Spanish moss like torn curtains. The air grew wetter, heavier, and the only sounds were cicadas and the soft roll of tires over packed dirt. Nobody spoke for a long while, not even Trent. Dylan kept the lead, his eyes fixed on the shadows ahead. Austin followed close behind, twitchy and alert. Malik's calm gaze swept the tree line like he was tracking something unseen. Toby moved quietly, lost in thought, and Trent muttered under his breath about how every horror movie starts in woods just like these. The trail wound through a mess of palmettos, pines, wild grapevines, and long-forgotten orange trees. More than once, they had to hop off their bikes to drag them over fallen branches or around washouts where the sand had swallowed the path. After a while, the woods opened. A wide ravine split the earth. Deep, dark, and slow-moving water churned at the bottom, and stretching across it, the old logging bridge. It looked like it had been built in a different century, maybe two. Most of the wooden planks were cracked or split down the middle. Some were gone entirely, leaving open holes that dropped straight to the dark water below. Nails stuck up like rusted teeth. The whole thing swayed, groaned, and creaked in the faint breeze. Austin took one look and shook his head. Nope, absolutely not. Somebody else can die first. Malik stepped to the edge and pressed a foot on the first plank. It bowed under his weight, moaning. "It'll hold," he said, then added, "Probably." Trent threw his arms up. "Oh, perfect. Great. We're going to die in the middle of nowhere, and they'll name this place after us. Idiot Kids Creek." Toby stared at the ravine. "If I fall before fixing Grandpa's ball, I swear I'll haunt y'all forever." Dillon stepped forward, calm and steady. "We go one at a time. I'll go first." Trent pointed dramatically. "Captain goes down with the bridge." Austin smacked him in the back of the head. "Shut up, man!" Dillon stepped out onto the bridge. The first board creaked, the second sagged. By the third, the whole bridge let out a groan like it hadn't been touched in years. He kept going, slow and careful. Halfway across, a board snapped under his boot, hard and loud. Dillon lunged forward, catching himself on a side beam just before his leg went through the gap. "Go! Go! Go!" Austin yelled. Dillon made it to the other side, pale and breathing hard. Austin went next, too fast like always. A board broke right behind him, but he hopped over the gap like a rabbit running from a hawk. Malik followed slow and sure, moving like he'd crossed worse things before. Then it was Trent's turn. He stepped onto the bridge and immediately started screaming, not because anything happened, but because everything might happen. Every board creaked under him. Every nail seemed ready to give way. Every gust of wind made him panic. But he made it. Finally, Toby stepped up. He didn't move quickly, didn't rush. He placed each foot with careful precision. Halfway across, his foot slipped between a missing plank. He froze. "You're good," Dillon called. "Keep moving." Toby pulled himself free, took a breath, and continued across. Step by step. until he reached the far side. They all stood together, staring back at the bridge with a collective shudder. Trent fell to his knees dramatically. "We're alive. I'm writing my will tonight." Austin wiped sweat from his brow. "We are not going back that way." Malik pointed to the air, sniffing lightly. "That's lake water, fresh. We're close." Sure enough, the smell drifted on the breeze. Moss, mud, cypress bark, and the faint sweetness of lake weeds. The boys pushed forward. The trail narrowed again, twisting between trees until the forest finally opened up into a clearing. And there, barely visible through the brush, sat a small cabin inches from the lake. Weathered, still, silent, a lonely chimney poked above the roof line. The porch sagged. The water lapped gently at the edge of the shoreline. Toby whispered, "Guys, we did it." Austin stepped forward, wide-eyed. "That's really it. The cabin." Malik nodded slowly. Nate wasn't lying. Trent's voice dropped to a reverent whisper. "We're standing on a real-life Yankees secret." Dylan's voice steadied the moment. No turning back now. The 5 boys moved toward the cabin together, and for the first time since Curtis's ball disappeared into the storm drain, Toby felt hope stirring in his chest. He didn't know what waited for them inside, but he knew this. The legend of Roger Maris was no longer just a story. They were walking straight into it, chasing Maris. By my Florida Short Stories. Chapter 5. The Cabin That Held Secrets. The cabin looked like it had grown out of the earth itself. Weather-beaten boards the color of driftwood, windows clouded with dust, and a porch that sagged under the weight of too many Florida seasons. It didn't look abandoned. It looked watchful. The boys stood at the edge of the clearing, staring, hardly breathing. Lake Rosa shimmered behind the cabin, still and orange in the fading light. Austin whispered, "Scariest place I've ever seen." Trent pointed dramatically. "This thing screams serial killer hideout." Malik stepped forward, calm as ever. Only one way to find out. But it wasn't Malik who moved first. It was Toby. He climbed the creaking steps, reached for the old brass knob, and turned it slowly. The door swung inward without resistance. The inside smelled like lake water and thyme, dust, old wood, coffee grounds hardened in the bottom of a mug, but nothing about the place said abandoned. Fishing rods leaned in a corner. A Budweiser crate sat half full beside a battered armchair. A jacket hung over a chair, as if someone had just stepped outside. The coffee cup rested on the table, dried rings staining the wood. Austin stepped in behind Toby. Somebody still uses this place. Dylan scanned the room, alert. "Look, Don't touch. Spread out." Toby walked toward the mantel and froze. There, leaning against a cracked picture frame, was a photograph. A younger man holding a fish longer than his arm, hat pulled low, forearms strong, a private smile across his face. Toby lifted it with shaking hands. On the back, written in fading blue ink, Roger Maris, Summer '69, Lake Rosa. Toby's breath caught. His knees nearly buckled. Austin grabbed his arm to steady him. "Dude, this is real. He was here." Trent's voice dropped to a reverent whisper. "We found the freaking cabin of a Yankee legend." Malik tugged open a drawer. "Guys, look." Inside were stacks of old baseball cards, some signed, some not, Yankees caps, a worn glove, and a tin filled with old fishing lures. Dylan whispered, this was his place more than once. Outside the window, the lake rippled just once, as if something had moved beneath the surface. Austin backed up. "Someone's been here recently. That boat out there? This place isn't old left. It's current left." Toby's voice tightened. "What if we're not supposed to be here?" Dylan held up a hand. "Quiet." But it wasn't quiet. A low rumbling noise drifted in from outside. A motor, growing louder, closer. "The boat," Malik said. "It's coming back." Dylan's eyes widened. "Hide. Now." The boys scattered. Austin ducked behind the wood stove. Trent slid under the bed and immediately knocked something metal across the floor with a loud clang. Malik crouched behind the crates. Toby folded behind the table, clutching the photograph. Dylan pressed himself behind the door. Boots hit the porch. Heavy, steady. The doorknob turned. The door creaked open. A tall man stepped inside. Work boots, faded flannel, fishing hat pulled low. In one hand, he carried a string of fresh base. In the other, a tackle box. He set them down, cracked his back, stretched, then walked toward the mantel. He picked up the photo Toby had just held and spoke softly to it. "All right, Raj, let's see if they're biting tomorrow." 5 boys froze. This wasn't Roger Maris, but he knew him. The man turned and spotted the metal pan Trent had knocked over. His expression sharpened. "Who's in here?" The boys held their breath. He took 2 more steps. "Come on out," he barked. "All of you, now." Dylan stepped out from behind the door, hands raised. Austin crawled out from behind the stove. Malik stood. Toby rose behind the table. Trent popped out from under the bed like a dusty, terrified groundhog. The man stared at them in disbelief. "What in the holy hell are you kids doing in my cabin?" And just like that, the real story of the cabin began. Chasing Maris by My Florida Short Stories. Chapter 6. Jake's Story. The man didn't move at first, didn't blink, didn't breathe. He just stared at the 5 boys standing in his cabin like they'd climbed straight out of Lake Rosa. Then he finally spoke, deep, sharp, gravelly. "What in the holy hell are you kids doing in my cabin?" Dillon stepped forward slowly, hands raised high. "Sir, we're not stealing anything, we swear." Austin came out next. Malik followed. Toby rose from behind the table, clutching the photograph, and Trent crawled out from under the bed, red-faced, covered in dust, and looking guilty enough to catch a charge. The man took them all in, one by one, calloused hands, sun-beat face, eyes sharp enough to cut rope. Finally, he jabbed a finger in their direction. "Somebody start talking." Toby swallowed hard. We're looking for Roger Maris." The man blinked. "Roger Maris?" His tone changed, not softer, but careful, like the name could wake ghosts. "What do you boys want with Roger Maris?" Toby took a shaky breath. "My grandpa, Curtis, he had a ball signed by Maris. He gave it to me, and I lost it. We're trying to make it right." The man's entire expression shifted. He walked closer, boots thudding on the wooden floor. "You Curtis Willis's grandson?" Toby nodded. The man let out a long, low breath. "Well, I'll be damned." He turned toward the lake, visible through the dusty window. "Curtis was a hell of a fisherman," he said. "Taught me how to throw a cast net on this very shore." Toby's lip trembled. "You knew my grandpa?" "Knew him?" the man said, almost offended. "Boy, your grandpa was a legend in Melrose long before Roger Maris ever showed up." He walked to a wooden crate and sat down with the weight of someone full of stories. "Name's Jake," he said. "Jake Collins." He motioned the boys closer. "And yeah, Roger Maris used to come here, fished with me, sat right where you're standing. He liked the quiet, liked being away from reporters, crowds, noise." Jake scratched his jaw, looking past the boys, seeing memories instead of faces. "But boys—" His voice dropped. The room seemed to still. "Maris ain't doing well. He's sick. Has been for a while." Toby stared at the floor. Is he dying?" Jake didn't answer right away. Finally he said, "He don't have many good days left. That's the truth." Silence filled the cabin, thick as the humidity outside. Jake leaned over and pulled out a battered folder stuffed with papers, maps, receipts, and scraps. He dug through it until he found a piece of torn Budweiser carton. From behind his ear he pulled a pencil and scribbled an address. "You want to see him?" Jake asked. "Then you better hurry." He handed the scrap to Toby like it was something holy. "Gainesville," Jake said. "Lives there with his family. Quiet place." Toby held the cardboard gently, like it might crumble. Jake looked at each boy. "You remind me of the stories Roger used to tell," he said. "Said a man ain't measured by home runs or crowds, but by who stands beside him when things get mean." Austin leaned forward. "Did Roger really say that?" Jake nodded. "He talked more about his teammates than himself. Said Mickey Mantle told him once, 'Rog, nobody hits 61 alone.'" Dylan exchanged a look with the others. That line meant something big. Jake stood and walked to the doorframe. "If anybody deserves a moment of Roger's time, it's Curtis's grandson." Toby wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, sir." Jake rested a heavy hand on Toby's shoulder. "Curtis would be proud of you, boy." "Proud of all of you." Malik asked, "Do you think he'll see us?" Jake looked toward the lake. The sunset lit the water, orange and gold. "You find that house, treat him with respect, and if it's a good day," he paused, "you might just catch the man behind the legend." The boys headed for the porch. Right before Toby stepped out, Jake called to him, "Hey, kid." Toby turned. Jake pointed to the cardboard in his hand. "That's scrap," he said. "Don't lose that one." Toby smiled for the first time since the ball disappeared into the drain. Then the 5 boys walked back toward the woods, carrying hope, fear, and the address of a legend, Chasing Maris, by My Florida Short Stories. Chapter 7. The Hunters and the Monster of Melrose. The boys pushed their bikes back through the tree line as the sun dipped behind the tops of the pines. Florida dusk rolled in thick and quick, swallowing the trail in purple light. By the time they reached the old dirt road that led toward town, cicadas were screaming loud enough to shake the branches. They stood at the edge of the woods catching their breath when an old Ford pickup turned the corner, rattling like it was held together by duct tape and stubbornness. Mr. Jeremy was behind the wheel, a toothpick in his mouth. Mr. Kevin sat on the passenger side, elbow out the window, eating peanuts like he always did. Jeremy slowed to a stop and pushed his hat back. "Well, look at this. Thought y'all got swallowed by the swamp." Kevin tossed a peanut in his mouth. "Didn't think we'd see him alive, honestly." Dylan called out, "We found the cabin." Jeremy squinted. "The cabin? You serious?" Austin leaned on his handlebars. Dead serious. Jeremy let out a low whistle. "Boys, folks have been looking for that spot since before you were born, and you just rode in there like it was nothing." Trent puffed his chest. "We're professionals," Kevin snorted. "Professional what? Lucky idiots?" Malik hopped into the truck bed. "Close enough." The others piled in, tossing their bikes up after them. Jeremy pulled onto the sandy road, dust kicking up behind the tailgate. "So," Jeremy called over his shoulder, "you meet old Nate?" "Yep," Dylan said. "He sent us down the trail." "And what did y'all think of him?" Kevin asked. Austin shrugged. "He's like a swamp wizard." Jeremy laughed so hard he slapped the steering wheel. "That's about right." The truck bumped along the dirt road, tall pines whipping by on both sides. For a while, nobody talked. Wind rushed through the open back, smelling like pine tar and heat. Then Jeremy cleared his throat. "You boys ever hear of TLB?" Toby looked up. The Lake Bigfoot guy? Jeremy grinned. That's the one. Tommy Lee Briggs claims he's seen Bigfoot more than he's seen his own cousins. Kevin cracked a peanut shell. He ain't lying. Tommy's got stories. Trent perked up. You guys actually believe any of that? Jeremy shifted his toothpick to the other side of his mouth. I'll tell y'all something. Back in '69, me and TLB were hunting near Rosa, right around where that cabin is. He paused, letting the moment breathe. And we swear we saw something moving through the trees. Austin leaned forward, eyes wide. Like Bigfoot something? Jeremy kept driving, eyes on the road. Big, tall, walking upright. Not a man, not a bear, something else. Malik frowned. What'd you do? Kevin answered first. We left. Fast. Trent swallowed hard. So Bigfoot lives out there? Jeremy shrugged. Either that or the ugliest moonshiner in the entire state. The boys erupted in laughter, even Toby. They rattled down the long stretch of road until the woods thinned and the orange glow of town appeared ahead. Austin tapped on the back window. Hey, Mr. Jeremy, you and Mr. Kevin hunting tonight? Kevin tossed a peanut husk into the wind. More like feeding the raccoons. They steal more of our bait than the deer eat. Jeremy nodded. Ain't nothing in these woods that wants to be caught any more. Dylan leaned back against the tailgate, letting the warm wind hit his face. Tomorrow, they'd be meeting Roger Maris himself. Tonight, they were just boys riding home under a Florida sky. The truck rolled past Betty's Pizza, past the Gulf Station, and past Mossman Hall. Jeremy pulled to a stop near Toby's road. All right, boys, he said. Y'all rest up. You got a big day coming? Kevin handed Toby the last peanut from his bag. Don't lose this one, he said with a grin. Toby laughed, and for the first time that day, it didn't hurt to smile. The boys hopped out, grabbed their bikes, and pedaled off into the quiet Melrose evening, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Chasing Maris by my Florida Short Stories. Chapter 8. Meeting Roger Maris. The boys didn't sleep much that night. Some barely slept at all. Toby lay awake listening to the ceiling fan tick, replaying Jake's warning over and over. If you want to see him, you better hurry. Morning came early. A soft gray dawn hung over Melrose, heavy with humidity and the kind of quiet that told you the day hadn't made up its mind yet. Mr. Jeremy pulled up at 7 sharp, engine rattling like a bucket of bolts. Mr. Kevin rode shotgun again, sipping black coffee from a cracked thermos. You boys ready? Jeremy asked. Dylan nodded. We're ready. Toby held the cardboard scrap with Maris's address folded in his pocket. He kept touching it every few seconds just to make sure it was still there. The drive to Gainesville was quiet. Fields slipped by. Pines blurred. Nobody talked. Nobody needed to. After 40 minutes, Jeremy slowed in front of a modest brick house with a screened porch and a patch of roses growing wild along the fence. A Budweiser delivery truck sat in the driveway, sun-faded but clean. Kevin wiped his hands on his jeans. This is the place. Toby stepped out first. His knees felt weak, his throat tight. Dylan stood beside him, steady like always. Together they walked up the small concrete path to the front door. Toby knocked. A moment passed. Then the door opened, and a woman in her late 40s stepped forward. Kind eyes, tired smile, hands that looked like they carried more than their share of weight. Yes? She asked softly. Toby tried to speak, but his voice caught. Dylan stepped in. "Ma'am, we're here to see Mr. Maris, if he's up for visitors." The woman studied their faces, sweaty, nervous, earnest. After a moment she nodded. "Come in, but be gentle. He's having a hard morning." They stepped inside. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, lighting dust motes floating in the quiet air. The living room was simple family photos, a radio on a side table, a small cross on the wall. In the corner, next to a window, sat a recliner, and in that recliner was Roger Maris, thinner than the photographs, older, pale. An oxygen tube rested gently across his cheek, but his eyes, they were still sharp, still alive, still holding all the things he'd done. He lifted his head slightly, looking at the 5 boys standing in his living room like they'd wandered in from another world. "Well, now," he murmured, voice soft but warm. "Who are these fine young men?" Dylan stepped forward. "We're from Melrose, sir." Roger smiled faintly. "Melrose? Haven't heard that name in a while." Toby moved closer, the new cardboard address in his hand. His voice trembled when he spoke. "Mr. Maris, my grandpa Curtis met you once. He caught a ball you signed. He kept it his whole life, gave it to me, and I lost it." He swallowed hard. "I want to fix it." Roger studied him for a moment, long, gentle, thoughtful. "You came all this way," he said softly, "because you wanted to make something right." "Yes, sir," Toby whispered. Roger nodded slowly. "That's what a good teammate does." Austin leaned forward. "Sir, did you really hit 61 home runs because of your teammates?" Roger's lips curved into a faint smile. "Let me tell you something," he said. His voice grew a touch stronger, like memory breathed life into him. "In 1961, things were noisy. Reporters everywhere, crowds, pressure, expectations. I struck out 3 times in one game. Fans booed me so hard I thought about quitting that very night." The boys held their breath. "But Mickey Mantle," Roger said, "he sat beside me in the dugout, put his arm around me, and he said—" He paused, letting the moment land. "Rog, nobody hit 61 alone." The room went silent. Outside, a bird chirped once and flew off. Roger continued, voice softer now. "You don't chase numbers. You chase each other. A team lifts you higher than you can go by yourself." Toby felt his throat tighten. Roger looked at him directly. "You boys, you stuck together. You came here for one another. That tells me Curtis raised you right." He reached beside his chair, pulled open a drawer, and took out a photograph, an old picture of him at bat, swinging with everything he had. Then he looked up. "Hand me that baseball," he said. Austin nearly dropped it, getting it out of his backpack. Dylan steadied Toby's shaking hands as he passed it forward. Roger Maris took the ball gently between his fingers. His hands trembled. His breath wavered, but he signed it. Carefully, beautifully. Roger Maris. 74. He handed it back to Toby. "There," he whispered, "a fresh one for Curtis's grandson." Toby blinked hard. "Thank you, sir." Roger reached out, laying a hand over Toby's. "You boys take care of each other, always." They stood with him a few moments more before his wife touched Dylan's shoulder gently. He needs to rest now. Dylan nodded. They stepped back, quiet and respectful. Roger lifted his hand in a small wave as they left the room, and the boys walked out into the Gainesville sunlight, carrying something more than a baseball. They carried a blessing. They carried a legend, and they carried the weight of a man who taught them what a team really meant. Chasing Maris by My Florida Short Stories. Chapter 9. The Ride Home. The boys walked out of the Maris home in a quiet line, the screen door closing softly behind them. The Gainesville sun was high and warm, the kind of heat that soaked into your bones. But none of them felt it. Toby held the newly signed baseball gently in both hands, cradling it like something sacred. His fingers traced the fresh ink again and again. Roger Maris, 74, Austin, kept leaning over just to look at it. Man, he really did it. We actually met Roger Maris. Malik nodded slowly. It felt like history, like we stepped into one of those old stories people don't believe anymore. Dylan looked out across the quiet street. We didn't just meet him. He gave Toby a second chance. Toby swallowed, voice soft. We did it together. Trent wiped at his eyes. Anybody says I cried gets punched. It's allergies. They walked toward Jeremy's truck, which was parked under a crooked shade tree. Jeremy leaned against the door, arms folded, face softer than usual. Kevin sat in the passenger seat, chewing sunflower seeds. Well, Jeremy asked, y'all get what you came for? Toby didn't trust his voice enough to answer. He just held up the ball. Jeremy let out a long whistle. Kevin leaned forward. I'll be damned. He really signed it. The boys climbed into the truck bed, and the old Ford rattled to life. The engine hummed, the tires rolled, and Gainesville began to fall away behind them. The ride home was quiet at first, not tense, just deep. The kind of quiet that settles over a group after something big. Toby stared down at the ball in his lap. It wasn't just about the ball, he finally said. Dylan nodded. No, it never was. Austin leaned back and let the wind hit his face. We went out there because Toby mattered. Malik watched the trees go by. Maris said it. Nobody hit 61 alone. Trent stretched out like a king. Guess nobody chases legends alone either. Jeremy called out from the cab. Y'all okay back there? Dylan answered. Yeah, we're good. Kevin tapped the back window. You boys did something most grown men don't. You stuck together. You finished what you started. The boys didn't say anything, but they all sat a little taller. The Ford rolled past the outskirts of Gainesville, through long stretches of pine forests and open fields. By the time they reached Melrose, the afternoon sun had started sinking, turning the town gold. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. Toby ran his thumb across the stitched red seams of the ball. Thank you, he said quietly, all of you. I couldn't have done this without y'all. Dylan clapped him on the back. That's what a team does. Austin nodded. We fix things together. Malik offered a small smile. Always. Trent groaned dramatically. Now somebody get me food. I'm starving. Starving people shouldn't have to chase baseball history. They laughed, real, stomach-deep laughter that filled the whole truck bed, the kind that comes after fear and hope and relief all mixed together. Jeremy turned onto Toby's road. The truck rumbled to a stop in front of the driveway. You boys did good today, Jeremy said through the open window. Real good. Kevin lifted a hand. "Now go celebrate before the rain rolls in." The truck pulled away, leaving the boys in the warm, glowing quiet of a Melrose evening. Tomorrow would be ordinary. Baseball, chores, summer days. But today? Today they walked with legends. And Toby still had one more surprise waiting at home. Chasing Maris by My Florida Short Stories. Chapter 10. The Surprise. Waiting back home, Toby's road was quiet as the boys pedaled the last stretch home. Evening light spread across the neighborhood in long streaks of gold, catching the tops of the pines and turning the dirt in the driveways a warm, glowing red. Toby coasted ahead, the signed baseball in his hands, held carefully like something holy. But when he rode into his yard, he skidded so hard his back tire fish-tailed in the sand, because sitting on the porch swing was Curtis, not angry, not disappointed, just smiling that same small smile Toby remembered from fishing trips and late-night stories. Curtis rocked back once, slow, steady. "Had a feeling you'd be up to something," he said, eyes twinkling. Toby swallowed hard and walked toward him, clutching the ball in both hands. "Grandpa, I lost your ball. I messed up bad, but I tried to fix it. I tried real hard." Curtis patted the space beside him. "Sit down, boy." Toby eased onto the swing. The wood creaked under their weight. Curtis let out a long breath. "You think I kept that ball all them years because of the ink on it?" Toby stared at him, confused. Curtis chuckled softly. "That ball wasn't special because Maris signed it. It was special because of the day I caught it. The memory, the people I was with, the feeling of it." He tapped Toby's chest gently. "A memory, not a trophy?" Toby held out the new baseball with shaking hands. "I met him, Grandpa. Roger Maris. He signed another one. For you. For us." Curtis hesitated before taking it. When his fingers closed around the ball, his eyes filled, years of stories rising up all at once. He turned the ball over in his hands, reading the fresh ink. Roger Maris, 74. He swallowed hard. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered. "Didn't think I'd see this again in my lifetime." He glanced toward the end of the driveway where Dylan, Austin, Malik, and Trent stood waiting by their bikes, not wanting to interrupt. Curtis nodded toward them. "You didn't get this on your own." "No, sir," Toby said quietly. They helped me." Curtis leaned back, the swing rocking gently. "Those boys," he said, "are worth more than any baseball. You keep 'em close." He paused, letting the words hang in the warm Florida air. "Life's gonna throw pitches you ain't ready for. That's just how it is. But those fellas," he nodded toward the boys, "those fellas'll help you swing." Toby wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Curtis put an arm around him. "Proud of you, boy," he said softly. "Proud of all of you." The cicadas rose up in chorus, buzzing loud and steady from the trees. The sky glowed orange and purple over Lake Santa Fe. A breeze drifted through the pines, warm as memory. Toby stood and walked back down the driveway. His friends grinned when he approached. "Well?" Dylan asked. Toby smiled, big and bright. "He's proud of us." Austin whooped and kicked his bike stand up. Mullock nodded with that quiet satisfaction he always carried. Trent pumped a fist, and together they rode off into the long Melrose evening, laughing, shouting, racing one another down the dirt road. Behind them, Curtis sat on his porch swing, holding the signed ball in both hands, watching the boys disappear into the sunset. And he whispered to himself, "That's what legends are made of." The summer of 1974 stretched wide open before them, full of promise, trouble, adventure, baseball, and the kind of friendship that lasts a lifetime. The end. And just like that, the summer comes to an end. Thank you for spending your time with this story. Chasing Maris was written for anyone who remembers long days, dirt fields, and friendships that felt bigger than the world itself. If you're listening on YouTube, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what you thought about the story. Your words matter more than you know. And if you enjoyed this audiobook, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future stories. Every like, share, and subscription helps keep independent storytelling alive and allows us to keep creating and sharing more stories like this one. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting creativity. And until the next story, welcome home.